Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. First meeting we're going to have is going to be on the Zoning Board of Adjustment. But before I do that, I would like to welcome, we have 4 new members to our Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Adjustment. And they are Mike Gulla here, Mike Kwasny, Kurt Hughes, and Gerald Sullivan. And I've met all but you, so I welcome you 4, and it ought to be an interesting meeting, and you'll have an interesting time. So congratulations. Okay, the first item on the agenda will be the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Before I also start that, I should tell you, if you have any electronic devices, please turn them off or put them to mute so you don't disrupt the meeting. And if you have a call, please take it outside so we can have a quiet meeting. Okay, now we are at the Zoning Board of Adjustment. The first item that we really have on there is just the minutes. And so if somebody would like to approve. Thank you. Second. All right. We have a motion by John and Galen to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion is passed, and we'll take a motion to adjourn that meeting. Okay, Galen and John made the motion to adjourn that meeting. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, now we will begin the actual Planning Commission meeting. And just to let you know, items 1 through 10 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with the staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by a Planning Commission member, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this Planning Commission are recommendations to the City Council, and the City Council will make the final decision with the exception of the following items. Item 4, which is 16 PD 046. Item 5, which is 16 PD 053. Item 6, which is 16 PD 055. Item 9, which is 16 UR 023. And item 10, which is 16 PD 047. The Rapid City Planning Commission's actions on these items are final unless any party appeals that decision to the Rapid City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Community Planning and Development Services Department by the close of the business on the 7th full calendar day following the action by the Planning Commission. I know that John wants to pull item 6. Is there anybody else on the Planning Commission that wishes to pull an item? Staff.
Item 5, please.
Item 5, okay. Is there anybody from the audience who would like to pull any of the items from the consent calendar? Okay, I will take a motion to. Okay, John made the motion, and Galen seconded that motion to approve all items with the exception of items 5 and 6 on the consent calendar. Any questions? All those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We'll now go to item 5.
It was brought to our attention that there may be one or more of you up there that have questions about the planned development at Auburn Hills to allow an apartment development. So we thought it might be best just to pull it and present to you this morning.
Okay, fine. Fletcher.
Item 5 is the final plan development to allow an apartment building. Property is zoned medium density residential district. It's approximately 0.56 acres in size, and it's located along Coal Bank Drive, which is accessed from Auburn Drive and Haynes to the east. Currently the property is void of any structural development. It's right on the edge of 2 districts, urban neighborhood and low density neighborhood, and this one is, future land use shows it as low density neighborhood. And there you can see Haynes Avenue is identified as an arterial street, Auburn to Coal Bank. It is a proposed 9-unit apartment building with 3 stories, and then right here we have a 9-unit storage building, which is not drive-in. The applicant is not requesting any exceptions to the minimum requirements of the zoning district, and would just require a building permit. However, this property is located in a planned development designation requiring a final plan development prior to issuance of a building permit. Here we have the landscape plan. Landscaping is in compliance. Elevations showing what the proposed apartment building will look like. And the storage building, as you can see, those are doors, not garages. This is a dark picture looking in. The sign is posted on the property. These are apartments to the east. And this is looking to the north along Coalbank Drive towards Auburn Drive. As you can see, there's a lot of apartments in this area. Looking directly north of the property, another apartment building. And then this is looking to the south and west, which has not been subdivided for development. And looking at the end of Coalbank Drive, any further development to the west would need to be platted and Coalbank Drive extended and water and sewer, et cetera. With that, staff's recommendation is to approve with stipulations noted in the staff report, and staff is ready for any questions you may have.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the commission? Any from the audience? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Oh, Mike Kwasny.
Madam Chair, one of the concerns that I had as I looked in, there's two, I think, apartment buildings being proposed. One is item 3 and one is item 6. And it seems like, and maybe I was going to have a talk with Vicki beforehand. I wasn't able to. We're putting a lot of these in front of residential. Is that our plan as we move forward? I've seen that a lot in neighborhoods, and that's one of the concerns that I have as we move forward.
Okay, I'll let Vicki answer that question.
So just to clarify, item 6 is actually for Rapid City Regional Hospital, and it's just a mechanical facility. Item 5, which is the apartment development that Fletcher just presented to, please note that this property is zoned medium-density residential. When the applicant came in with their master plan for Auburn Hills, at the same time that a lot of these single-family residential homes in the area were being platted, it was identified that he would have a mix of some apartment development too. So this is in line with the master plan that he had presented to us and to the neighborhood as it was being developed. The underlying zoning does support it. Because there's more than one building, it does require that he review and approve this as a planned development. If he was just bringing in one apartment building, maybe a larger building, it would just be a building permit and Planning Commission would see it. Having said that, this is in compliance with the underlying zoning and with the master plan for Auburn Hills.
Okay, thank you.
That answer your question? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Move to approve. Okay. Okay. Motion is to approve item 5 with the stipulations, I would assume, and Kim seconded it. Galen made that motion. Any other discussion? All those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion has passed. Item 6, I believe John would like.
Chair, I'll be recusing myself.
Thank you. John is going to recuse himself. All right. Galen made a motion to approve item 6, and Kim seconded that one. All right. Any comments, questions? All those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right. We are now at the regular items, so we'll begin the regular agenda items. Item number 11.
Good morning. Item number 11 is a major amendment to a plan development to allow a medical facility and detox facility to be developed on the property. Unfortunately, prior to the meeting, staff became aware of error in the notification process for this item, and as such, staff must recommend to continue this item to the December 8th, 2016 Planning Commission meeting, and that's staff's recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, John. And second by Galen to continue this item to the December 8th. Gotcha. All right. Any questions? Okay. And Kim's going to abstain from this vote also. Thank you, Kim. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We are now at item 12.
Thank you. Item 12 is 16 PD 054, a major amendment to the plan development to allow light emitting diode or LED signage. This is for the convenience store, restaurant, and car wash located at or southeast the intersection of Highway 44 and Elderberry Boulevard. This is a plan development that you've seen recently within the past year. At that time, there was a considerable discussion regarding the signage that was being proposed for the property. Today, the applicant has come forward with an amendment to add additional LED signage. So location of the property, as I noted, southeast of the intersection of Highway 44 and Elkville Road. This aerial is not up to date. The gas station, restaurant, and car wash have been constructed. The business is open today. Future land use shows it appropriate for mixed-use commercial development. East Highway 44 is labeled as both a gateway or entrance corridor into the community on the comprehensive plan and also a principal arterial street on the city's major street plan, as noted here. So this is the development as it exists today. There are two signs on the property, which you'll see in greater detail here in a moment, but one is located here. That is the standard gas sign for the gas station. So it's got price indicator boards on it. An LED message center was approved as a part of the final plan development for this when it originally came to you, and it is located on that sign today. This sign here is where the proposed LED message center would be located. The LED message center would be for the Inferno restaurant. That's the restaurant. It is also an on-sale liquor establishment that's located adjacent to the convenience store. So the applicant's submittal of the location of the Inferno sign and then the proposed LED message center. The LED message center measures 31.53 square feet per side with the existing, I believe, 29 square foot message center. There would be just under 60 square foot per side, or 120 cumulative square foot of LED message center that would be located on this property, which is what is permitted by Rapid City Municipal Code. This is just a look at the existing signage as is today. We'll have a little bit clearer. These are applicants' photos, and we've taken some ourselves. Here's the Inferno sign with the plan development sign posted on the property. I'll look at South Dakota Highway 44, looking to the west and looking to the east. This is a look at the Inferno sign as it exists today, as well as in the background you can see the gas station sign with the existing LED message center at the bottom. I'll look at both the signs in context with the development on the property. This has become part of an ongoing conversation that the Planning Commission has had regarding signage within this corridor. Just last Planning Commission, we had another discussion regarding the proposed convenience store with car wash located on the north and west corner of this intersection. They are proposing a monument sign with an LED message center on it as well. The Rapid City Comprehensive Plan does not support LED signage or high-profile pole signs in this corridor. As such, staff cannot recommend to approve the LED message center. We wanted to bring this forward for your consideration, and the Planning Commission has decided they would like to look at all LED signage that are proposed in plan developments. This is not in compliance with the Rapid City Comprehensive Plan, but we should note that it is in compliance with the requirements of the Rapid City Sign Code. With that, staff is recommending that if the Planning Commission should determine that this is the appropriate neighborhood and appropriate design for the LED message center, then it should be approved with the stipulations noted in the staff report.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I might just clarify for the new members seated on Planning Commission. So what that meant when Rob said that it doesn't comply with our comprehensive plan, but it does comply with our sign code, is when the city adopted our new comprehensive plan, it made recommendations. And one of the recommendations was that the city should go back and look at our sign ordinance and revise it to preclude a lot of these high-profile signs along entrance corridors and to take another look at where LED signage should or should not be allowed. To date, we have not done that. If this were located outside of a plan development, they would just be getting a sign permit. But because they're in a plan development, The members of the Planning Commission have requested that we bring these back to you for review and consideration based on the sensitivity of signs in our community and the concern about LED signage in general. So with that, just note, it is in compliance with the sign code. We have not amended the sign code to reflect what the comprehensive plan recommends. The comprehensive plan would not support the signage as presented. I hope that helped.
Thank you, Vicki. And I would just like to add on to that, that because we are in a plan development, it is our ability that we could say no to that LED sign. Is that correct?
So we're no longer given the opportunity through a plan development to look at some of the architectural designs and features as we were in the past. We amended our ordinance several years ago, and that was removed from the plan development process. There are criteria, as noted in the project plan, that we can review as a part of whether or not a development within a plan development is appropriate for a neighborhood. So you must go back to that criteria if you've got concerns with an element and state specifically where this design proposal doesn't comply with one of those criteria elements. It's no longer as easy as it used to be when it came to just saying that we don't believe it fits with the character of the neighborhood. Now you have to be specific. We have to go to, is there a safety concern? Is this something that's going to impact the adjacent properties? Is this something that they themselves are denied? Those kinds of criteria. So if you need assistance as you're discussing this, let me know, but we must be specific to the criteria set forth in the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Okay, John Brewer.
Thank you, Vicki, for the explanation. Just for the purpose of the new members and my tirade about the sign ordinance for the last how many years, it is in compliance with the city code. So the sign is in compliance. The other thing, after our last discussion, I once again drove that Gateway Drive, both during the day and the night, and it is developing as a commercial corridor. So although I participated extensively in the comprehensive plan, I certainly missed the conversation about what would be good or bad about signage on Highway 44. And as a commercial lane, I think on the discussion at our last meeting with regard to the sign that did not comply with the code and did not meet the comprehensive plan definition, it also didn't make any sense when I drove across that bridge. I mean, it really did look like a bad placement of the sign. On this particular issue, it is a business, another investment, and those people came forward to this commission and to the city, build a business, and they've asked under the code to put a sign up there. So I'm going to be in support of putting that sign there, and once again end this conversation with, I know it isn't going to be a happy day, but the comprehensive plan, I thought, had great input by this community. But until our ordinance meets the comprehensive plan, I don't think the comprehensive plan should guide each and every decision if what comes forward to this committee by applicants meets the city ordinance. So I'm going to be in support of this motion and hope that's consistent with what I've said and voted on in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Kurt.
Yeah, John, I appreciate that little input into how that comprehensive plan was put together, but I guess I have a couple questions, and the first one is what was the purpose of having this restriction in a entry corridor? Are we trying to keep that more rural looking, or do we want it to look like a business? And maybe, John, you can answer that, or I mean, why do we have an entrance corridor with restrictions on signage?
Vicki, why don't you answer that?
Madam Chair, thank you. So when we hired Clarion and Associates to work with the community to see what the needs and wants of the community were, one of the concerns was that when you drive into Rapid City, regardless of what direction you're coming, there seems to be an abundance of signage. And if you've ever had guests to your home, they may have even commented to you, Rapid City certainly has a lot of signs. And in order to improve upon that image of our city, the comprehensive plan took those comments to heart, and they have recommended that in the future, when we're looking at signage for new development, we consider what is appropriate, what is the image of Rapid City we want to present to those driving into our community. And that also goes with landscaping. You'll see as we go through different projects that if they're along the entrance corridor, we're going to be recommending that landscaping be adjusted somewhat so that it's pushed out to the street to create that visual impact that we want of our city. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. The other question I had is, are all the properties, what's the extent of that entrance corridor? From where to where on Highway 44? Where does it start, where does it end, and does it include all the properties within that corridor?
So it starts at the airport, and my understanding is it goes to about Campbell Street. So Highway 44 from the airport to Campbell Street would be the entrance into the city.
So all of the property from the airport to Campbell Street is under that entrance corridor. So any property that wants to put a sign out there is tied to that comprehensive plan for entrance corridor.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Vicki.
So not quite that clean. If this were a property located outside of a planned development and the sign that they were proposing, this sign as an example, was in compliance with the sign code as it stands today, it would not be before the Planning Commission and they would just go down and get a sign permit. Because this is in a planned development, it provides us with the opportunity to look at all of the elements of design. The Planning Commission has directed staff, this is unique, it's probably one of our, we have two directions. Always put on sale liquor on non-consent, and always bring signage within a planned development that includes an LED or a reader board to the attention of the Planning Commission. So you'll always see us present on those two items. This is one of those items. So if this were in another property along 44 that is not in a planned development, and we don't have a lot of planned developments along 44, they would be able to get a sign permit. And that's the difficulty with what you're facing today. And we apologize that the sign code hasn't been amended. If any of you have known the history in Rapid City of the committees that have been formed over the years to look at the sign code, not once, not twice, but 3 times since I've been here, it's a difficult conversation. We have two sides fighting for the rights to signage versus the impact of what signs do to our community. So we operate today with the code that we have before us. In the plan development, we look at the criteria that's set forth and see whether or not this sign is going to create a safety concern or going to negatively impact that neighborhood in such a fashion differently than a property that was located outside of a planned development.
Madam Chair, can I just add to Vicki's comments about the comprehensive plan?
Sure, go ahead.
The entryway corridor is not to prohibit signs, it's to encourage monument signs, not pole signs.
Thank you. That clarifies that too. Okay, Kurt, did you have anything else? Okay. Mike Kwasny, you were next.
Madam Chair, thank you. I guess I had a question, and maybe Vicki is the one that would be able to answer this. Did they know going in that they were in such a development that would prohibit such a sign?
So let me just clarify. Nothing prohibits the sign. The ordinance as it stands today, the sign code would allow the sign. Because it's in the plan development, as Karen pointed out at the start of her conversation, the Planning Commission has the authority to review the different components of design to ensure that it fits with the character of the neighborhood, doesn't create safety concerns. The applicant knew this was in a plan development as a part of the project coming forward. They're making the application with the contention that this is in line with what other properties are allowed and that it will not negatively impact the neighborhood or have safety issues as a part of their presentation. And I believe there's a letter of intent that's probably attached to that explains a little more about their desires.
Madam Chair, so another question for Vicki, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
So the intent, as I understood it, is to lower the signage, not necessarily restrict in a planned neighborhood development.
So, the pole sign already exists. That was approved in the last plan development prior to you being seated. What's on the agenda today is an LED reader board sign. Whether this was within this entrance corridor or any other property in Rapid City, the Planning Commission has directed staff that whenever an LED reader board is being proposed in a plan development, that we present it to you so that you can have this discussion and make the decision as to whether or not it's appropriate. So it's more the LED reader board, whether it was on a monument sign or a pole sign, we'd still be discussing whether or not an LED reader board is appropriate on this property. The fact that it is on a pole sign and the height of the LED may be something you folks want to discuss, but it's really the LED reader board, not the pole sign, that's on the table today for discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, Galen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I generally side with anything that meets current code, but I'm a little on the fence on this one. I guess is maybe the question for the applicant is what's the need for this additional signage? I'm not sure if anybody's here today to answer that, or maybe I can look up the application letter. But what changed in the last year? I'm just thinking I drove past this last week before I even knew this was on the agenda and thought, oh, there's the Inferno. It's pretty clear to me that I knew exactly where it was. I'm just maybe a little clarification on why this additional signage is warranted, if they're available.
For that, I would defer to the applicant's representative.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Brian Newman. I'm with Moyle Petroleum, Inc. To answer your question, Galen, we in-house, I'll completely honest, we in-house had discussed it previously. When we did the when KTM helped us with the initial plan development and application for our overall site package, it was not included. The reason for it is we have technically have kind of two separate businesses, the Inferno, the restaurant side, and the Common Sense, the C-store side. So we do run some promotion things, and I mean, quite frankly, right now it's kind of a now open, but we will run some small promotion items on the LED reader board under the price, the fuel price sign. And then the one for Inferno is strictly a Inferno promotions, our pizza, our restaurant side.
Okay.
I guess if I may, some of the questions came up, and Vicki has spoke to this, and I appreciate that, and Mr. Brewer. Our overall site package, yes, we are asking for an additional LED reader board. The LED reader board that we're asking for does fall under the allowed LED reader board for the city sign code that Vicki has pointed out. And then I also, for our overall sign package for our facility, for our 3.5 acre lot between our super tunnel, the Inferno, and our C-store, we actually, the overall sign package, square footage allowed, we fall, and I can get those numbers from with the help of KTM, but we're a couple hundred or more square feet under even our allowed. So we're not trying to bump that maximum limit too. We're trying to keep everything in compliance with some items through plan development.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Galen. Before I ask for a motion, I do want to speak to this item also, and that's, as a chairman, I don't know if I should or shouldn't, but I have not approved any of the signage, LED signage in that corridor, basically because I look at the comprehensive plan, and part of the reason that we made some of these recommendations in that comprehensive plan was we looked at 8th Street and Mount Rushmore Road and saw that signage and all the discussion that the citizens of Rapid City had, and said, we don't want Rapid City, when you come into town, to look like a row of signs. And that was one of the reasons why that comprehensive plan got approved with those recommendations. And so I feel strongly that that is something that we should comply with, and if we can, and I understand that the laws allow it, but through the plan development, I always want to see if we can lower that sign to a monument sign, which is still legal, or to not allow the LED signs. And I know there's some homes just north of this area, and to me, that's an intrusion into their livelihood to some degree. And I understand also the need for signage, and I'm not opposed to signage. I just think in our corridors we should be careful and take a better look at that. So when the motion comes forward, I will be voting against this, but I hope that we get our sign codes up to where we want them to be, and I know that's a long process, and we're probably waiting for our planning director to be here, but we've been waiting a long time, and I'd like to see that speeded up a little bit. But John Brewer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm going to make the motion to approve, well, the staff didn't make a recommendation. I'm going to make a motion to approve this sign, and as I stated earlier, I'm going to make that because until, what we know is that the law provides for this. So an applicant has the right to apply for it. What we know is the comprehensive plan is a great document that a lot of us poured a lot of time and effort into, but it's not the law of the land, it's guidance. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to come down on the side of the applicant on this particular one, so I'm going to make the motion to approve and encourage my colleagues to approve it as well. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to approve this LED signage. Do I have a second? Thank you, Kim. We have a second. John made the motion. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. And Mike Kwasny and myself were the 2 no votes. So that motion passes. Okay, we are at item number 13.
Item number 13 is a major amendment to a plan development to expand an industrial use. Properties located at 317 Maple. On May 26, 2016, the Planning Commission reviewed a final plan development to expand the industrial structure located on this property. The applicant is proposing to reduce the size of the expansion with this major amendment. Property is currently zoned light industrial district. It's just south of Omaha Street. This is the current development on the property. It's the location of Crescent Electric. The applicant is proposing to construct a 2,910 square foot addition on that west side of the property for a truck dock and more warehouse space. Future land use shows it as downtown, or, sorry, mixed use commercial, and Omaha is an arterial street to the north. Here we have the proposed expansion. Previously, the final plan development included this property to the west because the expansion was going to encroach into that property. It's been reduced from 5,033 square feet to 2,910 and is strictly located on this lot. The applicant is requesting 5 exceptions, the first being an increase in lot coverage from 75% to 92%. Currently, the property is 100% covered with either gravel or paving or building. In this area on the west side of the property, the applicant is proposing to put in a grass area with shrubs along this west property line. So staff is recommending that the exception to increase the lot coverage to 92%, which is actually a reduction from 100%, be approved. In addition, the applicant is requesting an exception to reduce the minimum landscaping required from 12,912 points to 7,525. Again, there's no landscaping currently located on the property. The applicant is proposing to add this grass area and shrubs, and the provision of even this much landscaping is an improvement in the area, and so staff's recommending approval of that exception. Next exception would be a reduction in parking from 19 parking spaces required to 0. As you can see along this east side of the property are existing parking spaces, and along this north side, parking spaces which back into the right-of-way. Rather than request the exception to allow parking to back into the right-of-way, they're asking for the reduction to 0, but since it's existing parking that is there, they do have the parking. In addition, this area to the south is leased from the railroad and is used as parking by Crescent Electric. Staff is recommending that the reduction in parking be granted. The other exceptions, the proposed truck dock area on this north side. Previously, the exception was granted to reduce the side yard setback from 25 feet to 16.6 feet. The purpose being that it's located adjacent to an alley on the north. This is a commercial and industrial corridor, and constructing this addition will get trucks out of this alley for their loading and unloading, and they'll be located on the property, thus not blocking that alley. And staff's recommending that side yard setback exception be granted. In addition, because the property boundary is now this property line rather than all the way to the west here, the side yard or the rear yard setback, they're requesting an exception to reduce that from 25 feet to 20 feet. That area to the west is a parking lot, storage area, warehouse, also owned by, I believe, Crescent Electric. And the addition of that landscaping and those shrubs along that west property line should provide a buffer should it be needed. Staff's recommending that exception request to reduce the rear yard setback be granted. This is looking at the property. Sign is posted on the property, and that's the existing parking along that east side, which backs into the right-of-way. This is looking south along Maple and to the north, directly across the street. And then this is in the alley. One of the stipulations of approval is to ensure that location of where these poles are on the sign to ensure that they can actually back trucks into this area. That will be reviewed upon submittal of a building permit. So the amendment is to reduce the size of the proposed addition, which was approved with the final plan development. The addition of landscaping and the improvements, we're investing in a local business that's been there for many years, and staff's recommending that the major amendment be approved with stipulations noted in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Fletcher.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Vicki.
I would just also like to add that these are difficult sites. This is an established property in the core of our downtown area, and to encourage revitalization of these properties, we must look hard and strong at what our criteria requires for parking and setbacks, et cetera, and see where we can give in order to encourage that revitalization of this area. What we've seen from this property in particular, and from others within this area, is that when we make concessions where they do have 12 parking spaces on the property, they're not designed exactly like the code requires. They do back into the right-of-way, but there's still 12 parking spaces. Because of the existing structure and the size limitations of the property as a whole, in order to encourage that business to expand and stay there, we sometimes have to look at these exceptions and come up with a compromise that's good for them and good for the community. As long as it doesn't create safety or health issues, you're going to see staff fall on the side of granting these exceptions. I just wanted to clarify that. There was a lot of exceptions brought to you today. We see this as a revitalization of an important area of our community, and we are hoping that you support the exceptions as presented.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, Mike Kwasny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, if I may, I'd like to ask Vicki another question.
You may.
I guess I'm a little confused on where the parking is then, if they're reducing the parking. I didn't see that, sorry.
So the site plan that Fletcher's going to pull up did show the parking that's there. When Fletcher said that they're asking to reduce the parking, they're not taking any parking away. The requirement is that 19 spaces be provided. They're providing 12. And as you can see, they back into the street and the alley. So they're asking that the requirement be reduced. They're actually not eliminating any parking from the property. They're still providing 12 spaces.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. John Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In past discussions, we've dealt with the availability of light commercial, light industrial, and this is an older part of the community with an existing building in there. So Vicky's comments are on point. Recently, the East of Fifth study, which was added to the comprehensive plan, calls for a lot of development in there. So and I'm really pleased that they're going to make some efforts to improve this property. It's just tough. It lays next to the tracks, and it's in an old part of our downtown. So given that, I am of the opinion that our light industrial and mixed-use commercial is such a valuable commodity that anybody will do anything to fix it certainly deserves our close scrutiny and consideration. And in this case, I'm going to approve it, so I'm going to make the motion to approve per staff recommendation.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, John made the motion and Galen seconded it to approve this item with the stipulations as presented. Any comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we are at item 14.
Thank you. Item 14 is 16 UR 022, a major amendment to the conditional use permit to allow expansion of an existing microbrewery and to provide additional outdoor seating. This is for the Lost Cabin Brewing Company, located on East Omaha Street. A conditional use permit was approved for the microbrewery use in 2015. The applicant, let me start you with some slides here. Location of the property is Zone General Commercial District. It's across the street from Hanson Larson Memorial Park. Development on the property today, there are no structural expansions being proposed as a part of this major amendment. They are proposing an outdoor seating area. It's going to be located in this area here. You'll see some plans that bring that out in greater detail in a moment. Mixed-use commercial area, we are seeing some redevelopment in this area. We're trying to encourage reinvestment in this neighborhood to try and create a connection between the downtown and the back and park area. West Omaha Street is a principal arterial street, capable of handling high volumes of commercial, residential, industrial traffic. This is a site plan of the existing site. As I noted, there are no expansions to the structure that are being proposed. The outdoor seating area is located right there. The expansion of the microbrewery is there's an existing retail shop that's located in this area here. There was a third suite that's being split up essentially between the existing retail and the existing microbrewery. The expansion of the microbrewery is going to be limited to storage only for materials and for product. So it should not create any expansion of capacity, no increase in the number of employees or increase the number of customers. Additional look at the outdoor seating areas that's proposed. With the elimination of the second suite, the requirement for parking actually decreased. So the inclusion of the outdoor seating area does not encroach to, or does not eliminate any parking that would be required. So they are meeting their parking requirements as a part of this request. Look at the site today. You can see the red on-sale liquor conditional use permit sign that was behind the glass, but they had the doors open, so it's leaning up there today. I'll look at Omaha Street to the west. I'll look at the park across the street and Omaha Street to the east. This is a look onto the site today in the existing parking lot, showing the retail center, and then Lost Cabin is located there on the right. And one more view of the site. You can see picnic table and temporary fencing right here. That's the approximate location of their outdoor seating area. I don't anticipate that they'll be using that a lot in the next couple months, but they should be ready for the spring. As I noted before, all parking requirements are being met as a part of this expansion. We're not anticipating any increase in the capacity or the number of people that are going to be patrons of the establishment. Staff is recommending that this conditional use permit be approved with stipulations that are in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Kurt?
Thank you for that description. I think this is a great use for this property. It's nice to see things happening over there. I just have one concern, and this doesn't affect that really, but the traffic pulling out of there onto Omaha Street can be a challenge sometimes, especially with Founders Park across the street. And, when you get the farmers market over there, it makes it kind of difficult to get in and out. But I will support it. I think it's a great use of it, but I do have concerns about any increased traffic that would happen pulling in and out of Omaha Street.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Patsy, did you have a comment?
Just as an informational piece for you guys, Omaha Street will be expanded to 6 lanes in this area within the next 3 to 4 years. I know it's in the STIP, so.
Oh, thank you for that information. Okay, any other comments or questions on this item? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Okay. John, you second? Oh, Kurt second. Okay. Galen made the motion and Kurt seconded it to approve this motion with this item with approval with the stipulations as submitted. Any other comments on the motion? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. I guess I didn't ask for a nays, but I don't think there's any nays. Sorry. We're now at item 15, and I want to disclose that I am working with the staff on tax increment districts at this point. It's a temporary place, and so any tax increment items or anything that's involved with those tax increment items, I will be recusing myself from, and so I wanted that to be noted. And I'm going to turn this motion or this item over to John since I'm recusing myself from this.
So, Galen and I are seated, and the rest of you are new. And tax increment financing is the last item that we're in there, and this is an issue with regard to reallocation of costs. I have speaker request items, and so I'm going to have Patsy present for the city whose TIF committee has denied this item, and they bring it forward to us on appeal. And so you'll need to listen carefully. This is a plan that has been in place, and they're asking for some changes in the financial numbers. So once Patsy goes through this so that she points out to you what we're talking about today, then we have a number of people that will speak to the issue for the applicant on the TIF. So with that, Patsy.
Good morning. Tax increment district number 38 was approved in 2003. Really, we're going to get this done. See, we're going to get there. All right, give me just a second. We'll adjust one more time. As we're waiting, tax increment district number 38 was approved in 2003. Part of the improvements that were included is construction of Eglin from about Beale Street over to the terminus of what is now called Cheyenne Boulevard. Rob, can you log this in for me? In addition to the construction of Eglin Street and Cheyenne Boulevard, there were some water line improvements. There's a water main from Beale Street south to about Anamosa Street, and then also some gravity sewer lines that were included. There were some, originally the proposal was to include a lift station just south of the railroad. With the expansion of a sewer gravity line from the railroad, just south of the railroad line over to the lift station over on Elkvale, the forced main line was not a requirement anymore because then they could flow the gravity north. Just a second, I'm almost there. Not that one, though. Thanks for your patience. So this is the property. It runs from Anamosa Street on the south, around in through here. As I'd indicated, Eglin Street was constructed. There's a portion that was redone generally here. And then Cheyenne Boulevard is really the portion that was constructed. It's not Eglin Street anymore, but the documents reference Eglin Street. So with this aerial photo that was provided in 2003, you can see there's really no development in this area. There's very little development in this area. And this area is also within that district, and very little development there. So today what you see is quite a bit of development there. There's a new university center, several businesses in there. There are a couple businesses in there. And to give you just a little information on tax increment districts, when a district is created, there is a base valuation determined. That's from the state, and usually whatever tax revenue is generated from the existing structures or development that's out on there, that is what's called the base valuation. Any increment or any revenue generated from this base valuation always goes to the existing taxing agencies. We have generally 4 taxing agencies. The school district continues to receive $45,000, almost $46,000. The water district gets $100,000. The city of Rapid City gets $11,000, and the county gets $16,000. Now that's important because there's been some discussion that none of the taxing agencies within a tax increment district receive any revenue until it's paid off. They receive revenue on the base valuation. So what the critical piece is when a district is developed, there are proposed improvements that are made. Any new development that is created within that district creates what's called a tax increment. It's the tax increment that goes to pay for any new improvements. And as you see on this slide here, the original base valuation was $3.3 million. Today it's at $47.7 million. And that generates about $700,000 per year over and above the $73,000 for the base valuation. So some slides for you. This is the terminus of DeGeest. Looking to the south, DeGeest will generally extend to the south. In this location on the very eastern terminus on the south side, there is no development. However, a little farther east, you'll see a motel, a Taco Bell, some McDonald's. You see the University Center here. Again, that same motel. Back behind here, there's a couple other motels. And this is actually from the west looking to the east. There's an Arby's, another motel, the University Center. This is the one motel that we'd referenced in a couple other slides. This is from the western edge from Eglin looking to the north. Here's another new motel. Here's the Dakota Steakhouse. And so here is some information from the very beginning and from 2003. So these are the items that are included today under the allowable public improvements. We have the water main for $300,000. There was a lift station and a force main that was identified originally, and before I identified that those weren't needed because of a separate non-eligible project. And then Eglin Street, we have the gravity sewer, a decel lane, a signalized intersection, the water main loop, and a detention dam, another detention dam in Eglin Street, and then some engineering and construction administration, and then again some financing. So on the right-hand side of the screen, here is a map of the public improvements. Here's the water line that was installed, one detention dam, another detention dam. Here's Eglin Street that was constructed, now Cheyenne Boulevard. Part of the original plan was to identify this lift station and a forced main along there, but because there was a separate project that extended a gravity main over to the Elkville lift station just off this map to the north, the lift station and the forced main sewer were not required any longer, so then they constructed a gravity flow system. So these are the costs that were, these are the original costs. We went over those a bit. In May of 2004, there was one amendment that included some additional funding for the water main to East Anamosa Street, a crossing for that water main, and then some contingency funds. And so this is really what we're talking about today. What happens with a tax increment district is when they submit their proposal, those estimates for all of those project costs are estimates. As time passes and the construction actually occurs, generally the costs increase because, you know, when you provide just an estimate, sometimes the costs are a little higher when they come in from the bids. So they are requesting to increase the water main cost item by $86,000. They are increasing the cost of Phase 1 of Eglin Street by $130,000. They have decreased the cost for the lift station, for the forced main, for the signalized intersection, because those costs were either not constructed or another entity made that improvement. And I'm referencing DOT actually did signalize the intersection, but it was at no cost to the developer or taxpayers for this project. So then they are proposing to increase the cost of the water main loop by $150,000, the $8,000 for the water main to cross the road. They are decreasing the line item for the engineering, construction, and administration for Phase 1. They are increasing the costs for Eglin Street Phase 2 by $736,000. They are increasing the cost of the detention dam, the second detention dam, by $135,000. And we'll go back to some pictures so that you can see potentially why this particular line item increased so much. They added some additional stormwater quality features. And then they also added some additional costs for the design for Phase 2. And then they have decreased all of the contingency costs because during certification, contingency costs aren't actually certified. Those dollars have to be used in a specific line item. And then as the TIF policy states, an additional $20,000 is added for the city's imputed administrative fee. So really what they're trying to do, they are not changing any of the total costs identified in the original plan. They are just adjusting the line item costs based on their existing expenses. So this next little thing, one of the questions that the Tax Increment Committee always asks is about the anticipated financing plan originally proposed. And in 2003, the anticipated payoff was in 2015. And today, with the changes, the anticipated payoff is 2021. However, with additional development in the district that may be proposed because there is some vacant property, this could pay off sooner rather than later. I know that there's been a reference to $700,000 in an existing tax increment fund. However, half of that has already been paid out for Phase 1 certification, so there's really only about half of that left. But still, that will go, once this is completed and the new developers agreement is approved, those dollars will go directly to pay off this fund. There's always a question about how many districts that we have active today. This form is put together at the end of every July, and so there are a couple that you do not see on here. There are 3 new districts other than, so we are currently 78 tax increment districts. There are some that have already been dissolved, so will be removed from this list this coming July. There are some that have yet to be certified, some that are close to being paid off. And just so you know, state law allows up to 10% property valuation within a community within tax increment districts. Today we are at about 3%. So again, here is the slide from 2015 that shows the current boundary of the district. This is the property that here is where De Geest actually would extend. This is the property that we looked at available for development. There's more property here that's available for development. This property here was actually sold to the school district at their request, or the state, excuse me, for the university center. Here's the 2 motels, Arby's, a couple other, I think there's another motel in there, a couple other fast food. Here is Dakota Steakhouse. Here's another motel. So there's been quite a bit of development within this particular district. And then again, the public improvements map that we can reference if you need to. And then this here is really your options for the action in front of you today. Generally, you need to identify whether it meets the policy criteria, and usually with a cost recertification, you're not changing any of the criteria originally submitted. So, typically that would be a yes answer that's already been determined. And your voting options, you can either overturn the TIF committee's denial. From there, we will revise the project plan, notice a public hearing, and it will come back to you with the actual project plan. We anticipate that date to be January 5th. You can make a motion to overturn the TIF committee's denial with amendments to their proposal if you wish. Again, if that's the motion, then it comes back to Planning Commission for a public hearing. There's also a motion that you can make to request the applicant provide additional information if you feel you don't have enough. Or you can make a motion to deny and uphold the TIF committee's denial. In that case, the applicant has the option to appeal to the Legal and Finance Committee. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I know that there are several other people in the audience that have comments if you would like to hear those.
Thank you, Patsy. Anybody on the commission that would like to ask a question of Patsy before I go to the speaker requests? Jade.
I actually had a question for you, probably, John.
Michael?
I may need to, I am involved with a business in this area, and I don't know if I need to be taken off. I don't know that answer, and that may directly affect a business that I have interest in.
You may want
with
to
the
sidebar.
McDonald's.
You may want to sidebar with Carla.
I'm sorry, Carla, if I may.
I will speak some general conversation about conflict of interest. If you feel like you have a conflict of interest, and I had a conversation with John this morning, it's not an uncommon thing for people on the dais to have a particular interest in an application. If you feel like you couldn't be objective, or if there might be a perception from the public that you have an interest in it that makes you less objective than an average citizen, you can certainly recuse yourself from the decision. I'll leave it up to you if you feel like what you know the circumstances, and so that's kind of a judgment call for the members of the commission when there's not a direct. Like sometimes members of the commission obviously have a direct interest in one of the applications. Kim recused herself earlier, I believe, for that reason. So, but in a situation where there's less of a direct connection, it is up to your individual judgment, and I will support that, whatever it is.
I believe on this case I should probably recuse myself.
Okay, thanks, Michael. I don't know, is there an order that all three speaker engagements are for the item? And I have Scott Sumner's first. Is that, please identify yourself for the record. Thank you for coming this morning.
Good morning. My name's Scott Sumner. I'm an attorney. I'm here on behalf of the Heartland Retail organization that was behind this TIF. And my purpose is primarily just introductory. Kathy Johnson is one of the owners of the Heartland Retail entity that behind the TIF will also speak, and Hanny Shaffey to some of the engineering matters. And my purpose is just to outline the situation that this request presents. First, the request does not seek any additional or new tax increment financing. All of the requests are reallocations of the existing financing. To the extent there might be any impact on the ultimate payoff date, that's simply a function of how fast development occurred within the tax increment district. It's not a function of any of the math involved in the reallocation request. So we're requesting an amendment to reallocate the budget among existing items. I think it's important to point out that there are no new or different public improvements that were constructed as compared to the original project plan. What we have is that some of the items were constructed, but other of the items came in as being more expensive to construct. So there are no new budget categories, so to speak. All of the public improvements that are behind the request for the amendment were constructed pursuant to plans that were approved by city staff and the city engineer's office. And in fact, some of the improvements had components built into them that affected costs that were done at the request of the city staff. All of the construction costs that we're asking for are actual construction costs for improvements constructed pursuant to approved plans, and they were all let for bids under a public bidding process to the lowest bidder. So, you know, the assurance that the price is a fair price is, in this case, is the same assurance that you have in every public works bid project. All of the costs are previously identified as allowable cost. It's just simply a matter of bringing the project plan budget into conformance with the actual costs what was constructed. There was some delay in the construction of some of the improvements compared to the original plan, but they were all constructed within the time allowed under the TIF rules. One of the benefits of the timing of this is there were some savings on financing costs as compared to the original original project plan as well. I think that covers my introduction, and I defer next to Kathy Johnson.
Scott, before you leave the dais, just one clarification that you could make. You mentioned several times about the improvements. Just for the clarification for the commission, TIFs finance public improvements, streets, water, sewer. They don't build anything for the applicant. Is that correct?
Correct. The costs that are underlie the request for amendment are by and large associated with drainage structures. You'll look at the line items where the larger share of the money is being reallocated to, and one of those line items is the second detention pond is considerably more expensive than was originally budgeted. And another line item that's quite a bit more expensive is the construction of phase 2 of what was originally Eglin Street, now Cheyenne Boulevard. But a good deal of the cost of that Eglin Street construction also incorporated drainage features. So it's a little bit, you gotta look behind the facade, so to speak, to see where those real costs are. So the primary driving force for the increased cost has to do with drainage. And one of the things hasn't been shown, there's quite a bit of the land in this tax improvement district that's dedicated to the detention ponds as well, that's not available for development. And it's a pretty significantly sized parcel just east of the University Center, running south from Cheyenne Boulevard or Eglin Street. I'm not sure how to do that.
So, yeah, you can just draw it.
Yeah, it's in this area here. Shouldn't have put my finger there. Okay, so there's the second detention pond is in that area. And so that's all of the increased costs that are requested are increased costs associated with the construction of public works improvements that were built pursuant to plans approved by the city and bid under the public bidding, competitive bid process.
And the applicant is, the financing in here is the obligation of the applicant. The TIF is merely a method of repayment. And if the TIF didn't repay them, they would be on the hook?
Then the developer takes that risk, yes.
That is.
And, and it's been pretty good development, as you've seen from the numbers that Patsy pointed out, an increase to something in the neighborhood of 47 million in assessed valuation. 44 million in assessed valuation. So there's been quite a bit of improvement. There's still room for some improvement, as she's also pointed out. So this looks like a pretty successful TIF for everybody. Everything that is requested comports with, we'll say, normal operating procedures. This is just, one of the things that's maybe important to point out is, and Patsy alluded to this in her comments, is that when you put together the original project plan, your numbers are best estimates at a point in time before the final plans are completed and at a point in time that may be separated in time from the actual construction date, which, passage of time can affect pricing as well. And so some question might arise is, why is this so much more expensive than was originally estimated? And that's, a function of multiple factors. In the drainage facility, there were some additional improvements proposed and approved, so the drainage improvements are different than originally planned, but still within the same scope as was originally planned. And then you have just the fact that the estimates don't necessarily comply with comport with what the contractor thinks it should cost to construct it. So,
very good. We thank you for your comments this morning. Catherine Johnson, please identify yourself for the record.
Yeah, and I can use that if you want to write on the screen. Okay, all right, thank you. Touch that little green arrow to get rid of that. Okay. With this test here. Okay, there you go.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, members of the Planning Commission and city staff. I'm Catherine Johnson, and along with my husband, Doyle Estes, we are the owners of Heartland Retail Center, LLC, which is the developer on this TIF. And just to follow on a bit from Patsy's presentation, I have a presentation here to ensure that the proper orientation and description of the improvements that were constructed. You probably know by now where this TIF is. It's near the intersection of exit 61 and Elkvale, Eglin Road, and now Cheyenne Boulevard, which, of course, in 2003 was called Eglin Road, but Cheyenne Boulevard is that section that is goes east from Elkvale. And these are the businesses that have been mentioned before. North of Eglin, Cheyenne, across the railroad tracks, there's the Comfort Suites. There we go. Just have to be firm. Yeah. Dakota Steakhouse, the Fairfield Inn, Watiki, Fairfield Inn, Perkins. And then we get to the intersection with Cheyenne, McDonald's, the Sleep Inn, Arby's, Taco Bell, then the Baymont with Marco's Pizza down here, and then the University Center. And, excuse me, also as mentioned, this was approved, $6.8 million in TIF financed public improvements were approved by City Council in 2003. And then there was this amendment in 2004, which in essence reallocated $100,000 of contingency costs to expand the water main project that was from Elkvale down to, so that it could connect to East Anamosa Street for future use. All the TIFs were approved within the allowable time frame of 5 years. In 2006, there was a cost certification process that went through. Then in 2012, there were some additional finance costs added to those certifications. Then this process that we're here today to talk about, we started that with a submittal to the Finance Office for certification of Phase 2. This is the final cost certification. We submitted that in July. October, we submitted the amendment to reallocate these costs among the line items. That's really the subject of today's conversation. And I think Patsy has some more, the newest information. The assessed value I had here was 38, but it appears that's increased then to, what, 47 is the number you have, 47 million. So there's been a step up since my numbers in the most recent years. But here's the map. We've seen this before now. And what I thought I'd do is to just make sure that you understand all these improvements, is to use this map and kind of walk through what's really been done. And probably the first thing that happened was because there was in 2003, there was a discussion underway for Box Elder to annex this area on the east side of Elkvale. And the city of Rapid City suggested that they would like this annexed. So because of the TIF to cover these public improvements, this indeed we annexed with the city of Rapid City. This is the Box Elder line right here. And this area, if not for this TIF, this entire area over to Elkvale would indeed have become part of Elkvale. Box Elder, excuse me. And then following that, the water main projects began. And this area was already, was developed, as you know. The water pressure and the water amount was really insufficient for that area, as well as support any further development in this area. So because of this water main that was constructed down here into, this is the Beale Street area that's sometimes referred to, the water main project that was constructed here and then down all the way through on Elkvale, that provided the water pressure, one, to improve the situation here, to allow for the expansion of what we see now, which is the Dakota Steakhouse and the Comfort Suites, as well as this whole area then now can be, it's available for development. It provided sufficient water for this area. This is where the Watiki, the Fairfield Inn, and Perkins is. And it provided water sufficient down Elkvale, one, to support the development now. This is the Call of the Wild gas station, C-store, and so on. And right now there's a big, Eddie's Truck Stop is building a new facility right in this area. And then, of course, at bringing water down to along Elkvale, it's a water loop, which I think has some significance, allowed this little stub, which goes into this big water tank here, and then that water goes all the way to the airport for its fire protection and so on. Then it also, the first phase was this portion of Eglin, which is called Cheyenne, and this detention pond, and then that allowed for the development along in this area. Then along came phase, and then also it had the sewer line too, which takes you down to the railroad tracks. And as Patsy explained, that sewer was redesigned subsequent to the initial project plan. Then along came Phase 2, and Phase 2 extended Cheyenne to the boundary with Box Elder and built this major detention pond and the associated water drainage features. And then also a signalized intersection here that included some turn lanes and so on for traffic flow. Now, you know, I realize that that drainage, oops, that wasn't right. Drainage is not often, I mean, it's not a sexy item, but it's certainly critical to the appropriate, orderly, planned development of any municipality, any community. And these drainage structures that were built, detention ponds 1 and 2, along with the structures that were included in Cheyenne Boulevard Phase 2, they are not insignificant. This takes drainage from an area much larger than the TIF area. And it really includes retention pond 1. This is the outlet from detention pond 2. There's these long drainage structures some along Cheyenne and then some along, the Geest hasn't really been built in here, but it's the area that runs north-south. And then a large box culvert to direct the drainage under Cheyenne. So major features that were constructed as part of building that road and those retention ponds. So the infrastructure then that was part of this TIF really developed, you know, a significant list here of businesses, and these are the assessed values. 2015, they've gone up since then. But I want to call your attention here to this university center or higher education center, or now it's called Black Hills State University at Rapid City. This would not have been possible. Locating this would not have been possible without this TIF. And by any measure, this is the right location for that educational facility. At the time, they were looking for a location that had easy access on-off interstate. Students come from all the way from, you know, Wall, that area, all the way to Sturgis, Hot Springs, Ellsworth Air Force Base, of course, is many students come from that area. So we're looking for a place easy on, easy off access, and with room to expansion. So that the land to the state of South Dakota for that facility was part gift and part sale, but it ended up in a $13 million construction. Now, this isn't assessed value because the state of South Dakota doesn't pay property taxes, but this facility allows for roughly 11 to 1,200 students there each semester. So it's and then of course the faculty and the staff that go along with that. So it's a major economic boost to Rapid City and to that corner, exit 61, that would not have been possible without this TIF. And I think, you know, Patsy's numbers are more accurate here than ours, but then this year was over $662,000 of incremental tax revenue. I think they've increased. Patsy's numbers were a bit over 700,000. But there's sufficient tax revenue now to be able to pay this TIF. The numbers that I submitted for the amendment application, boy, you gotta be. How do I do that? Why does
That one gets rid of that piece.
I know, but I'm trying to. Oh, I did clear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. Now, I'm a little confused about, okay, so when I first calculated this, I did not include the tax revenue that was held by the city, as well as I didn't include the tax revenue from the assessed value from Taco Bell, and that was in the amendment that we submitted in October. I'm a little confused about the $700,000 in tax revenue that's held currently by the city, which would be available to make a payment upon certification, final certification, because when we asked that question and we got written answer that there was indeed $700,000 in the held by the city, but despite that, the new calculations, assuming there's roughly $700,000 in tax revenue, would pay off in 2019. That includes no additional development in this area, and there is adequate area for further development. So I think that's a very conservative number, but it's well within the period of time which is typical of other TIFs, as well as the requirement of state law. And so you can see this is our sheet that we turned in, and Patsy's was a bit different, but you've seen this before. And so this is our requested Amendment 2, and just so, to make sure that you understand what this means, if you just look at this last column, and you probably have this mastered now from the original presentation from Patsy, but what this really means is that a positive number in black, is that we are requesting funds being transferred into that column, or into that line item, so that the actual construction costs can get paid for. And as Attorney Sumner referenced, these actual construction costs were based on designs approved by the city, and they followed the city bid process, and low bid was selected. So then the numbers that are the negative numbers that are in red here, we're asking for funds to be transferred from those categories, and they all balance out so that the transfers from equal the transfers to. And we can talk about this in a little more detail if needed, but I'd like it now at this time to turn it over to our engineer, Hanny Shaffey, which will talk a little bit more about the costs that were incurred. Hanny?
Thank you, Catherine. Hanny, identify yourself, please, for the record.
Good
Welcome
morning. My
this
name
morning.
is Hanny Shaffey with Dream Design, and we were involved in the design of this project. A couple of things, like in addition to the great job that Patsy and Kathy and Scott have done, the TIF improvements on this were constructed in 2 phases, as was mentioned, and the costs were estimated based actually in no plans, just preliminary lines on the paper without identifying the size of the drainage improvements. And the construction happened over a period of time in which, as you all know, costs go up with time. They don't stay stagnant. And some of the features that were constructed, actually working on that project, there were a lot of things that were regional in nature. They impact the growth of the community and the stability of Ellsworth, and the growth not only of Rapid City, but the growth of the areas around it, including Box Elder. So the revisions to TIFs, typically, or amendments to TIFs, or actually before even I go to that one, I think I wanted to go back to the map just to explain a couple of things. On this map, Kathy mentioned that water tank that was built on top of the hill, I think somebody took that, here it is. On top of the hill, which is about right in here. That water tank is the tank that allowed the city to provide fire flow protection to the industrial park. And that was the reason for that amendment, which is basically to put in a water connection to East Anamosa to connect that 16-inch water main, which is labeled as the water loop, to the industrial park to provide water coming in from the north. That 16-inch line, was stubbed to allow for the construction of that water tank. And that water tank, if it wasn't for the 16-inch water line, the fire flow protection at the Rapid City Regional Airport would have stayed at a lot less than what they are going to be very soon, or actually today. The city has lit out another water main that takes water from this tank all the way to the airport. So that is a huge improvement. The other item that people don't realize is for Ellsworth Air Force Base, we have, I believe it's a 12-inch water main that was constructed more than half a century ago, and that is made of concrete. And that was the only source of water, delivering water to the Ellsworth Air Force Base. And we all know how critical to our economy and our national security is Ellsworth Air Force Base. You know, and actually that was not disclosed at that time too much, because the alignment of a water line, which is a 16-inch line, was constructed to the end of Cheyenne Boulevard. There was a meter pit that was installed to provide water for this subdivision, and also to provide emergency water for the future as the rest of the connection was constructed. And under a different project, another 16-inch water main was constructed all the way to Radar Hill Road and was connected to the Box Elder system. There are valves in here to make sure that that water is utilized only in cases of emergency. So that's, you know, that 16-inch along Cheyenne Boulevard was not even in the estimates when we started. It was, I believe, either 8 or a 12-inch water main. Those are some of the critical items in addition to the drainage. When we started this project, just to give you an idea, the Cheyenne Boulevard as master planned by the city at that time was actually a collector road that connected to the railroad tracks just like that. And looking at the regional improvements that were needed in that area, we actually worked on analyzing what is the master plan for the entire region. We currently have I-90 and we have a service road that is disconnected. So we anticipated the need for another connection. We worked with city staff and we proved to them that Cheyenne Boulevard can be connected all the way to Radar Hill Road on the east side. As part of this project and other projects that were constructed later, the Cheyenne Boulevard grading was done all the way to Radar Hill Road, and also the 16-inch water main connection was connected there. So those are some of the things that really happen that people really don't stress on. So there are huge benefits, not only the economic impact that is directly coming out of this TIF area, but the regional component. So this TIF is not really just for this subdivision, but also for the entire region. You know, the amendment of TIFs, you know, and reallocation of items within TIFs is a standard process, you know, that happens with almost every TIF. These are some of the active TIFs that exist today. The column is basically on the first column. It shows basically the year the project plan was adopted, and then the column before the last is basically the number of amendments that happen within that TIF. That gives you the dates and the amount within that TIF. So the precedence has already been set. And eliminating items within a TIF and adding additional costs to the components within the TIF has been done in the past, as long as the total cost of the TIF that was approved does not exceed the amount that was approved. So these are very critical items to really for this TIF. And you're going to say, why did this TIF not get approved at the TIF committee? The TIF committee has different members, and there are members on the TIF committee that are very consistently against or opposed to TIFs for reasons of personal reasons or lack of information or what have you, but they're consistently against any TIF. So there were 6 members present at the TIF committee. There were 2 county members, and the county is under the perception that TIFs take away money from the county, which is not true. It's money that does not exist, because if it wasn't for the development, there will not be any increase in taxes within the TIF. So they vote typically, consistently against TIFs. And then there is one council member on the council, and I personally respect his opinion because he's consistently, I don't believe he ever voted for any TIFs within the city, like as a council member. So those three have voted against it. So there were other three members present. So there was a tie, and a tie in a TIF committee is considered to be a denial. And that's why we're here before you folks to really appeal that denial. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you, Hanny. I have some speaker requests up, so Kurt, you're up first.
Thank you, John, and thank you, speakers who spoke out about this. And I have no doubt on the value and benefits of this TIF. I mean, that area is just great out there. What's happening, and it's developed an area that I don't see how we could have done that development without that aid. My questions are more on the reallocation part of it. I know the value of it, but I look at the reallocation, and you've eliminated a lift station and force main and a signalized intersection. I guess my question is the engineering effects of that. Was that, and I don't know who can answer this. I see the engineering department isn't here. But was that lift station and force main part of a bigger picture that would serve other areas that now we won't have, and the city will have to eventually put that lift station and force main in? Eliminating it, to me, could pose a problem. Is there anybody that can?
Can I answer that?
Okay.
So originally the lift station was proposed for about right in here. About the same time as this TIF came forward, there were other plans by other developers that actually installed a gravity line somewhere in this area and connects to the Elkville lift station that's north. So, and at the time, there wasn't really enough action in that lift station to make it functional. So the city, the city's preference was actually for this gravity line from this area to connect up to the existing lift station. Since that time, we have also upgraded that lift station on Elkville to accommodate additional capacity that we anticipate for, all of the development. So actually, it better served the city by not having this second lift station south of the railroad track and utilizing the existing facility.
Okay, thank you. I understand that. And you had a signalized intersection. I assume that's the Cheyenne Boulevard one?
Correct.
Did
and
somebody else pay for that? Is that why we're taking it out?
DOT actually installed that and paid for it.
Okay. And I had one other question. You said that most of the increased costs were for drainage, but it looks to me like the big increase was Eglin Street or Cheyenne Boulevard. Is that the extra drainage within Eglin, or is it the 16-inch water main? Then why wouldn't that be allocated in the water main?
Well, when they bid this project, I believe they probably bid it together, and so the costs that you see are really a combined effort. The water main was done at the same time as Eglin Street. The detention dams were generally done at the same time. The easternmost detention pond was the most expensive. And let me go back to at least one of these pictures here. You can see it. No, I didn't include it. But the pictures that Kathy had provided actually shows the extra drainage mechanisms that they included, and really that was a stormwater feature that had come forward about that same time. All the regulations changed a few years ago, and so they have to detain the water before it gets to the pond, And all of those extra drainage pieces, you know, come at a cost.
Catherine Johnson here, and just to add to that, Patsy's absolutely right. When we put out the bid package to which we selected the low bid, these two were together, the Eglin Street Phase 2 and the detention dam, because the drainage features were part and parcel of constructing that street, as well as that large water main, which I believe originally, as Hanny explained, was anticipated earlier to be a smaller diameter of water main. So these were bid together. So even though we broke these numbers out, this doesn't have the actual numbers.
It's this number here.
These are what we're asking to be reshuffled.
Correct.
Yeah, but,
And so here
oh,
we
I
are.
see. Yeah, this right here, exactly. So these numbers were bid together. This was one package. So there's somewhat of a, it wasn't real clear in looking through all of the invoices and so on, how to allocate those two. So they have to be looked at kind of in total, really. And if I could just say, one more thing. Keep in mind, and I mean, I think it's important to know that when these numbers are originally put forth in these project plans, no design has been done. These are pre-design. They're best estimates based on what is known at the time, but it's before any design gets done. So it's very difficult, and that's why the number of these reallocations that have been approved that we showed it's so common, because pre-design, it's very difficult to get numbers that turn out to be what it turns out to actually cost.
Yeah, and I can really relate to that. So, and then the only other question I have is maybe for the TIF, the Tax Increment Committee. Hanny gave a description of why this was denied. Is that the whole story? We had two county and a council member who always votes against them, and then the rest of the committee is in favor of this?
That is correct. Generally, the TIF committee is split.
Okay. I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Good questions. Just before I go to Galen, who's up for a question, since we're doing history on this one, the TIF Review Committee got a change when the city provided an ordinance that increased membership of the county from 1 to 2. And a little bit going back to Hanny's remarks, is it changed the temperament of that committee in review of tax increment financing. And the only reason I mention that a little bit is that the city can either go to its tax funds, its capital improvements plan, or it could bond to make these public improvements. The history of this community for 78 TIFs has been using TIF financing, which is a kind of a private-public partnership. The private entity takes the risk, and the public entity builds the public supports the public improvements. So there'll always be a discussion as to whether people like them or not. The council is elected, and they can exercise their vote on the basis of whether they like them or not. But I encourage this commission to remember that what we are looking at is, does it make sense? Are these approvals and upgrades right to do under the TIF? So there you have it. My comments. Galen, you're up.
Okay, thank you. First, Patsy, can you pull up we have 4 options, say, right? The kind of the menu of what we can do. Thank you. And then as I look at this again, maybe I'll again express a little disappointment that I didn't see the TIF committee minutes. Was that just last week that this happened?
That was last Wednesday.
I guess I would have appreciated having a chance to kind of review what happened there, and I appreciate Hani introducing, why are we here right now is because of that denial, and I guess it would have been nice to have that in advance, but is that something that's available right now? Do we know?
They have not been reviewed yet.
Okay. Because I think it'd be nice to hear the discussion of everybody before we hash it here, because we're kind of talking about this blind without hearing what somebody else had to say about this. So just my 2 cents on that matter. So I think that's all I'll say for now. I'll yield to somebody else while I
Galen, yeah.
keep this up for maybe a couple minutes while I figure out what we want to do here.
Mr. Chair, can I add just one thing?
Yes, you may.
The TIF committee looks at the TIF applications, and their concern was the delay in the certification process, the extra timeline, and, again, as Hanny had referenced, because the county commission and the one council member they have strong opinions on TIFs, and the other 3 that were actually there, they supported it. Generally, the school board member, on occasion, mostly always supports them, especially as it comes to paying them off. But generally, with your action today, if you approve it, you will see the entire plan amendment coming forward. So the only time that you won't see it is if you actually say no. But then the applicant does have the opportunity to appeal your decision, similar to what they did with the TIF committee, to the Legal and Finance Committee.
So
I'm going to ask him to leave that up too,
yeah,
Galen, because I'm struggling the same thing.
I'm just going to make a motion right now, if I could, the first option, motion to overturn the TIF committee's denial. I'll look for a second, and then we're also looking at our time right now for this meeting. I think we need to get moving. So
the first option is to overturn the TIF committee denial and ask for the revised project plan to come forward to this body for approval.
Hold on, let me take a step back. So that means when you come back, so can we just, is there any way to approve this and just move it forward at this point?
No, state law requires a public hearing before the Planning Commission.
If I may,
Let somebody
Galen,
else talk.
I've got you up, Kim, next. And so, and just to follow up on Galen, because he asked the question I was going to ask, what possible additional information could we or anybody receive, and I guess my question would be to Patsy, that would change anything that we've heard today? And if you say there's more that you need, and Galen asked for minutes, but we would see that when it comes back January 5th. Is that correct?
Correct. I will make sure that the committee minutes are linked.
Very good. Kim, you're up.
I just have one question. I understand.
It's a delay. Just
How about now?
there you go.
I understand, taking bids and estimates and how, costs changed. I understand that piece. My question is, all these projects are completed. There's no more unforeseen costs coming through.
That's my understanding. And generally, before the final certification can occur, every project, every developer has come forward with a cost reallocation so that the proposed costs with the original plan or any amendments after that match what was actually done. So this is really the last step before they can finally get paid for all of their costs, and we can, close it out after it's paid off. So this has to occur generally with every plan. If for some reason it does not go through, I just want to make sure everybody's understanding that if for some reason all the way through this cost certification doesn't go through, they still are allowed to certify this total cost right here. So they can certify according to those line items. What we're trying to do today is to get them to be paid, actually to be paid out for the costs that they've expended. As of today, even without any kind of amendment, they have the right to request that amount according to those line items. But because the costs were different than the original proposal, they are requesting this line item cost. So whether or not, the amendment goes through to actually get their cost repaid as they actually expended, they still have the right to get those costs recertified.
Thank you, Patsy. I want to alert the commission that we meet from 7 to 9. It's 10 till 9, and I understand that this has been a long education as well as just understanding the topic. We can vote to extend the meeting if you have a need for more information, or we can take care of our business prior to 9. So, Galen, you have another question?
So yes, I'll be needing to leave at 9, so I'm going to make the motion to, the first option, motion to overturn the TIF committee's denial of the amendment and reconvene this matter January 5th.
And have a second. I have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Kurt, I see your light up.
That was going to be my plan, was to make that motion, so no.
Does everybody understand the motion? Will you please clarify it for us, for sure, Patsy, before we vote?
Your motion is to overturn the TIF committee, their denial of the amendment. And so then with that, the application will be submitted with an entire project plan amendment that goes through the regular application process. Will provide notice to the public as required by state law, and it will be an actual agenda item for a project plan amendment to reallocate these costs. And you will see the final project plan document as well.
Any further questions or discussion? Motion is option number 1. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. That was a lot of work this morning. Thank everybody for coming down and help us through it. I'm going to invite the chair back for the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you, John. Do we have any discussion items?
Just a couple things. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Linda Mershon and Andy Skull publicly for their years of service on the Planning Commission. It's somewhat anti-ceremonial the way that you step down from the Planning Commission, and staff certainly has reached out to them to thank them, but we wanted to do so publicly as well. It's a lot of effort they've put into serving on the Planning Commission. And then lastly, we'd like to wish everyone a happy and safe Thanksgiving, and to show our appreciation for all you do, there is some sweets over on the table. Please help yourself on the way out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from the commission? Thank you, Galen. Do I have a second? All right, got several seconds. All right, motion, or the meeting is adjourned.